it should not be seen as surprising that some of the leading figures of the revolutionary process were said to be either believers or practitioners of this New World belief system that we refer to as vaudoue or voodoo.
I like to share with my students. Think about what master you must have if you decide to hold your meeting in a swamp of alligators.
This kind of going so far as to take the life of your oppressor is already there. And the place where that meeting took place, the alligator swamp, that was a place the whites didn't go in because they were really alligators up in there. So very few people could go in there and come out. But the black folks had a different relationship with the ecology than whites had. They mastered having this relationship. The whole concept of the Yoruba religion is to know and understand the forces of nature.
When you're trying to get free, it's very important to create your own identity. When you want to oppress somebody, the thing you do, you change their name, you change their religion, you change their language. And the Haitians understood that they needed their own language. This is why they speak the French Creole. That's a form of their own language. They knew that they had to go back to their own religion. They went back to voodoo. And there were people who were Catholic, there were people who were Christian, there were people who were different religions, but they went back to voodoo, and that codified everybody.
It was an African spiritual force that brought the people together. And when African people were brought together, it gave them a common goal. When they had a common goal, then they knew the common enemy, and then they would take care of their own business.
And voodoo is not just a religion. I mean, Africans didn't really have religions. They had a way of life that at best you can call their sacred science in dealing with cosmology and ecology.
Intentionality was to make our stuff so fearful and so evil and so scary that we run away from it. And so all you gotta say is that, when I was growing up, if I met a lady and I asked her where she's from, she said she's from Louisiana, I'd be backing out, oh, she might know voodoo. She'll put something in my soup. She could do some people. See, that just make us afraid of our own stuff.
We ain't talking about no Dracula movies here, no zombies. We're basically talking about Africanism. We're talking about people that understand the strengths of plants and of nature, and how to, outwit a militia by using what the gods have provided you on this earth.
So you call upon lowers to meet the task that you're confronted with. If you're engaging in war, you would call upon a lower that has the characters and qualities and dispositions of being warlike or strong and strength and fearless.
Dying was an opportunity to go back to the ancestors, to Guinea. Right? So there was no fear.
Through science and through faith and through the will of not fearing death. Most Haitians don't fear death. They don't.
A lot of Haitians, they say don't fear death. So when you look at a lot of rappers now, a lot of rappers here in America, they will have Haitian gangsters in their entourages. And a lot of these dudes will have that Haitian muscle behind them. So this just shows the kind of respect and even fear that a lot of people still have for that Haitian rebel.
I mean, imagine if you're not scared of death, you're not going to be a good slave. And this is one of the reasons Christianity preached suicide is a sin. Yeah? One of the reasons that you get your reward. You get your reward in the afterlife, but only if you're a good slave.
It really is a science of the spirit. And that this voodoo that they demonized, the demonization of it was intentional because they wanted to separate us from the very thing that gave us power.
Let's be clear, a lot of African spiritual systems believed in what we call the transmigration of the soul. So they believe that the soul is eternal. This was very problematic for people you want to enslave. Again, coming back to before we even get to Haiti, in Africa itself, there are copious records among Europeans writing about slavery of Africans just jumping in the sea. I'd rather dead than be a slave. Consistent. And particular groups, so the Igbo of Nigeria, who are a group that very much believed in the transmigration of the soul, they were one of the groups that it's recorded by Europeans were most likely to commit suicide because they believed they'd be reborn in Africa. They believed that their soul lived forever, so I'd rather die than this stuff.
There is a cultural, spiritual unity that unites Africans and it gives them power. Even today, in the African American community, it is the church that is the most powerful. And when anybody wants to sway the people, they always bring pastors in. because they understand the pastors have the ear of the congregation and the people in the community.
We don't go shocking when you said rise of the dead when we talk about Jesus Christ. You know, if they say they can have Jesus rising, we can have my mama rising.
I had a heart attack some years ago, about 7 years ago, something called ventricular tachycardia. Heart beating too fast, it won't stop because I'm always doing stuff, you know. And they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. So finally they came one morning and said, Mr. Small, we're gonna bring in the electricians. So I said, no, y'all full of joke. He said, oh no, we're gonna bring in the electricians. Because they have doctors who are human electricians. And their job is to measure the electrical current that goes from your brain to your heart and to your other organs, and to look at the relationship to the electrical current in your body and how much is it being interfered with from things outside of your body. Does that sound like voodoo to you? So that's what voodoo is talking about. And while on one hand we deny it when we talk about voodoo, but here in our highest science, it is proven to be reality.
So the Africans had absolutely no fear because they knew that this was a transformation, that it is how you live that matters, not how you die.
The concept of zombies comes from vaudoue. It's an African concept. And it's not about the living dead, it's about worshiping the ancestors, praising the ancestors. But the white supremacists, they flip that into something demonic where people are going to come out the ground and walk around and get you. And that's that boogeyman concept that they've created because of the Haitians rising up and getting revenge. And that's always been a scary thing for the white supremacists. African people rising up, getting revenge on them. That's the zombie mentality that they've created because that's their fear. When you look at the old zombie movies back in the 1920s and 30s and 40s, they would actually use Africans and Haitians as zombies.
And out of their West Indian island comes a tale of terror and voodoo, of witchcraft and zombies, and all the weird black magic that the white man seldom sees.
All of those old zombie movies had voodoo themes, so they were very open about it then. When it comes to guerrilla warfare, and this is what the Haitian Revolution is a lesson in, we have to understand how guerrilla warfare works. When you're going up against a superpower, you can't go head up. You have to attack the flanks, you have to attack from the back, and you have to learn how to weaponize everything. So the Haitians, they learned how to weaponize nature, weaponize rocks, weaponize trees, weaponize animals. Understand that, because when they had the first voodoo ceremony, they had that in an alligator swamp. Now they knew that the white supremacists weren't going to no alligator swamp, but they were just so in touch with nature, they knew they needed to weaponize everything.
Once you get to the point where you're going to do this, what you're actually doing is you are bringing the God of war within you. And every one of us as human beings has the God of war in us. We many times tried to keep it down.
The War Council was August 14th. They decided the revolution would start a week from there. A lot of those Africans did not speak the same language. They all came from different spaces, and a lot of them didn't know how to count. When would the revolution? So each were given, this is another, I do this also. Each were given 7 stones, everybody at Bois-Caïman. And then they went back to their spaces, the plantation. Every morning, they were supposed to let one go. When there was no more stones in your hand, then coupetet boulikai, burn it all down.
Pat Robertson said that the devil was conjured up by the Haitians, and they had a devil-worshiping ceremony, and the devil killed all the French and killed all the whites on the island, which is a lie, by the way. They did not kill all the white people on the island. That's another big propaganda lie that they like to promote.
Something happened a long time ago in Haiti, and people might not want to talk about it. They were under the heel of the French, Napoleon III and whatever. And they got together and swore a pact to the devil. They said, we will serve you if you'll get us free from the French. It's a true story. And so the devil said, okay, it's a deal. And they kicked the French out. The Haitians revolted and got themselves free. But ever since, they have been cursed by one thing after the other, desperately poor.
Pat Robertson said that Satan came up, killed all the white people, and the Haitians have been cursed ever since. And that just shows how racially insecure do you have to be. You would rather give props to Satan you would rather give credit to Satan than a group of African people who really put in the work and got rid of the French.
The night originally chosen to start the Haitian Revolution, so we remember the Haitian Revolution, August the 22nd, August the 23rd, right? The original plan was to start on the 24th. The reason the 24th was chosen was because on the 25th, the entire government was meeting the next day. So the ambition from the beginning was to kill the entire government and take over the island. The only reason the revolution had to start earlier, the rebellion had to start earlier, was because on the 21st, somebody struck early. And slave masters captured someone, tortured someone, and were warned that there was a rebellion coming. So they decided to strike early.
It's like asking the question, how did the Vietnamese defeat the reigning superpower of the United States of America? And part of that answer rests with the question of guerrilla warfare. That is to say, trying to avoid, whenever necessary, face-to-face confrontations of one military brigade facing another military brigade, but harassing the invading forces, who after all oftentimes are not very familiar with the geography.
So there was a dinner that happened a week before the Bois-Caïman ceremony, and actually it's now, scholars say, that's where the rebellion was planned. So it wasn't like they planned it on the spur of the moment on the night of the 22nd. The main leaders sat down and planned a week before, maybe months before that, had their dinner. The crazy part about it is that the Europeans knew that their privileged slaves were meeting for dinner, and they didn't think anything of it. They were so utterly convinced that black people were never going to do anything about their situation, could never overthrow them, they could never be defeated by a bunch of lazy, backwards niggers from Africa, that they got complacent.
How to be able to create bamboo, knives, how to have blow darts. You know, all of these things they used against these forces because these forces could not fight a guerrilla-type warfare.
So with the martial arts and the idea of the fighting, whether if we're talking about Brazil, capoeira, or the motions of if we go to a voodoo ceremony and you see how they work with spears in different ways, or we go to the Amazons and you see how it's applied, it's the philosophy, the genesis of it all is a form of worship where even if the slave master comes, it more looks like it's a celebration of parties and different things going on. So it's not intimidating. But at the same time, it forms a form of martial arts, a form of self-defense, where when it's time to rise for the revolution, the masters didn't even know that you was already training a bunch of troops and now you're ready to go.
One of the fascinating things about the Haitian Revolution is how little pride human beings outside the African diaspora have taken in it, which is fascinating to me, because this is an event of universal human significance, the only successful slave revolution in the whole history of humanity, in all the millennia of slavery. They've been from Greece to Rome to the Ottomans to the Abbasids. No one's ever had a successful slave revolution.